and welcome back to my kitchen for a new dessert devotion. I can't wait to share with you a new dessert recipe and an inspiring devotional. Today we are going to make a cookie butter pound cake. We're going to start by sifting our flour. We're going to sift together 3 cups of all-purpose flour, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, and a half teaspoon of salt. Now we're ready to cream our butter. The reason my butter is sliced into tablespoons like this is because I forgot to just leave it out to soften at room temperature. So what you can do as a hack in your kitchen is place the butter on a plate, slice it evenly, and put it in the microwave for about 10 or 15 seconds at a time until it becomes really soft. And then you're ready to start creaming your butter. Now my butter has reached a mayo kind of consistency, and I'm going to slowly add in 3 cups of sugar. Now I'm going to turn it up a little bit to medium speed and whip this for about 4 to 5 minutes until the butter and sugar look like sand and the color is slightly lighter. Here comes the fun part, y'all. Now I'm going to add a half cup of that cookie butter to my cake batter. And then I'm just going to add my 6 eggs, just one at a time. I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla, and then I'm ready to alternate in my batter my flour mixture and my buttermilk. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my flour and add it in slowly on a low speed to my cake batter, and then I'll add a little bit of my buttermilk and then repeat. At this point, you only want to mix your batter until it's just blended. Don't over mix it or it makes your cake tough. The key to being able to flip that pound cake is to make sure that you really grease your pan. I'm going to use Baker's Joy in my pan. I've cut out wax paper to lay in the bottom of my pound cake pan and then sprayed it again. I'm going to carefully add my batter to my pan, and then I'm going to bake this in a preheated oven on 325 for about 65 to 75 minutes. So now that our cake is in the oven, let us settle in for a time of devotion. I don't know about you, but do you like making mistakes? I really am one of those people that tends to beat myself up when I make a mistake. I think about all the ways I could have made different decisions, and I think about, why didn't I see this before? Why didn't I see the signs coming? Why did I believe them? Or why did I go along with it? Or I should have taken that advice. You know, I think about all the ways that I could have made different decisions or different choices or turned a different direction. And then I proceed to go on and daydream about how my life would be if I had not made that decision. If only I had said no because I knew I had too much going on or I really wasn't into the project. If only I told my friends, nah, y'all go ahead without me. If only I had stood up to my boss and said, absolutely not, I don't think that's right. Or maybe if I had just spoke up for myself, or maybe if I had not said anything at all. Maybe you do the same thing. You think about and daydream about how things would be if this had never happened, right? And not only that, I begin to lament or mourn the time wasted because of that decision. You know, I mean, how many times have we looked back and thought, if I had known what my major was going to be, I would have gotten through school a lot sooner. If I had known what things are going to be like, you know, I would have made this choice a lot sooner, or I would have cut my losses a lot sooner, or I would have got out of that relationship a lot sooner, or I would have spoken up or advocated for myself a long time ago. I wish I had known better. I wish I had known then what I know now. And look at all the time that I can't get back and the things that I can't undo. Well, it's interesting because I just recently heard a podcast with John Maxwell, and he talks about the return on failure. And while we do a lot of times beat ourselves up or have a huge pity party when things go wrong, whether we've made the wrong choice or maybe we made the best decision at the time, but other things happen to us. When we are in those situations where things have gone all the way wrong, we have the opportunity then to get a return on our failures. It really raises to mind for me that we have two choices. We can sit there and throw the biggest pity party because we made the wrong choice, or we feel like we should have gone in a different direction, or we should have taken a different position, or we should have responded or reacted in a different way. Or we can say, what can I learn from this? How can I take this bad situation, this undesirable circumstance, the situation that I don't want to be in, and have the spiritual maturity to learn from it? I think about the story of Joseph, which is a story that is well known that we find in the book of Genesis. And I'm going to be reading from the 39th chapter, which is halfway through Joseph's story when he is in prison. And it says, beginning in the 20th verse, that Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He remained there in prison, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. If you know a little bit about Joseph's story, we remember that Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob, and his 10 older brothers particularly took exception to that. The tension and the jealousy got so bad that ultimately his brothers hatch a plan to get rid of Joseph for good. And they end up selling him to traders. And those traders bring him to Egypt. So there he is, a slave. He serves initially as a servant in Potiphar's house, who is the commander of the guard or the top commander of the army. And he makes the most of his job there. I mean, he goes from being the servant to the one in charge of the household. But then he's falsely accused by Potiphar's wife of assault and finds himself in prison. But even there, even though he's reached another disappointment, not only does he have the disappointment of being betrayed by his family, of being subject to a life in slavery, but now he's thrown into prison. And y'all, Joseph spends the next 13 years in prison. So he comes to this same crossroads that many of us come to. When we're in a situation that we don't want to be in, when things are not going our way, when we are having the toughest of times, we have two choices. We can sit there and languish, blame ourselves, blame other people, just run the situation through our mind over and over and over again. Joseph could have sat there complaining about his family, complaining about Potiphar, complaining about prison, complaining about God. But instead it says that Joseph just keeps on moving. He capitalizes on the moment where he is. So much so that the Bible has the nerve to say that the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. In prison? But what we see is God is setting him up. Everything that he's experienced, being in charge in Potiphar's house, even being in charge in the prison, making relationships with the jailer, and even with the cupbearer, which will eventually help him find his way out of prison. These were like things that God used ultimately, not only for Joseph and his turnaround, but to ultimately save the future of the entire nation of Israel. My mother used to tell me growing up, there's no such thing as wasted time as long as you learn from it. If you are in a tough situation right now, if you are in a pit, if you are in a prison, and you are far from the palace moment where you are going to be redeemed, remember the story of Joseph. That even when you are in a tough time, in a place that you don't want to be, and maybe a place that you didn't ask to be, just like Joseph, God is still with you. God can still bless you where you are. And ask the Lord today, Lord, show me how I can get a return on my failures. Show me how I can cash in on my disappointments. Show me how I can learn from my tough times and grow me to be a better person, not only for myself, but for your glory. Amen. While our cake is cooling, it's time to make that nice cookie butter glaze. I have 1/4 cup of butter, 1/4 cup of cookie butter, and about 4 ounces of cream cheese. From there, I'm going to add about 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of milk. And this is where you can kind of play with it. If you want a really thick icing, you can add less milk. If you want it to be more of a glaze, maybe even a glaze that you can pour over the cake, just add more milk to your icing. Now that my cake is cool, I can add my icing on top. There's no right way to do this. I'm going to use a spoon this time. It's kind of thick. You could also put your glaze in a piping bag if you want to put a certain design on it or give it more of that drizzle effect. And for a finishing touch, I'm just going to add a few cookies on top. Listen, we all have our ups and downs in life, but my philosophy is keep praying and keep baking. God will turn it around. Thanks for joining me at Dessert Devotion. Be sure to check out more sweet devotions at dessertdevotion.com.